So now you got the engine installed and you're ready to make games, except you don't know how to use the engine. Hey everybody, my name is Jason Boza and welcome to Make and Break Games. In this video we're going to start a new project from scratch and basically go through the steps of making a character move from left to right. Now I don't want anybody to get caught up mimicking me, but instead I want you to pay attention to the questions I ask and then ask your own questions in terms of how you want to make a game. Games are just a bunch of features that are put together that a designer might think is fun. So when you decide on what features you want to break down those features into smaller steps and do each one at a time. So think about the feature you want to make and how you can use the skills you learn to make that happen and what skills you need to learn to make it happen. Well, that's my little spiel. Let's get right into it.
Alright guys, here we are in the GoDot engine, and we want to do is create a new project. Don't worry about this project, that's the one that I made for the time-lapse video, last video. Time-lapse video, last video. Yep, that's what I wanted to say. Anyway, so we want to make a new project. I'm going to give it my project path and just make a new folder. Call it Platforming 101. Create an edit, let it load. We start off on a 3D environment. We want to go to a 2D and we just want to create a scene. That's the very beginning. That's what I ended up doing. Basically, this is my first stopping point because I didn't know what else to do. I did a little research on just making a character, making a platformer, and ended up with finding out that this is my root node, call it my level, and everything's going to be node based. So when you press that plus button, it's going to allow you to make a new node. And you notice that is that everything's a node, and you'll have a ton of different objects that you can work with. Unless you know what you're looking for, this can take a long time to kind of go through, right? But if you went through every single bit, you would eventually just kind of like know what you want to do, what you want to use to a certain extent. What I ended up doing is just looking it up like anybody would, and found that kinematic body 2D is what I was looking for. So that's like the very first step, right? It's gonna be my character, so I'm gonna rename him character, just so I know what I'm working with here. Don't worry about this little triangle thing. It's just telling you that it doesn't have collision. That's going to come later. We don't really need it right now for what we want. All we want to do is make it move left and right. And the next step for that is to be able to see it. Because right now we don't see anything. We have this character object and we can't see it. So if you press F5, it'll ask you to save something. So we just save quickly a level. And as you see, there's nothing there, and that's because we don't have any textures or images on it. To fix that real quick, we need to add a sprite object. And here's something very important to think about. This is what I ended up thinking about when I typed in sprite. Because the only reason I typed in sprite is because I had to look into, all right, how do I put something that I can see? How do I make a character? And it basically told me use sprite. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I know that I want to make a game using these tools eventually. Sprite's not going to do it for me in the long run. Animated Sprite will, according to its description, because that's the one that's going to let me have animated characters. But for the purposes of this video, we just want to do Sprite because we know how it works fully. But animated Sprite is going to be in the back of my mind when I need it. So now we have a sprite, and we have an image down here brought to you by GoDot engine themselves. And what you want to do is just drag it over there to the texture. These are the properties for the sprite. Just drag it in. Something to note, kind of you won't know until you see it. Someone tell you. One of the videos will probably tell you. This is one of the videos that I saw told me just click on this thing, and any of the children under this node will be stuck to it. So if you don't have this clicked, what ends up happening is you can separate your nodes either intentionally or unintentionally. More likely than not, it'll be unintentionally when you're talking about a sprite and their character, because you kind of want them to be together. So We want to lock them in place so then you can move them around without having to worry. So now we have a character that's visible. F5 again. It's going to tell you to select the scene that you saved, and just so you know, it knows what's the main scene to load when you run this game. Anyway, now you see this character, right? But you can't do anything with him, and he's just going to sit there forever. So now we need to learn how to control our character, and to do that we need to attach a script, because the script is going to be basically all the rules on all of the, you know, the engine, the guts of every object. So you put as many objects you want on the level, but nothing will actually do anything besides sit there and look pretty unless you start adding some scripts to them. So the character, we want to add a script, and the default is fine for now. I honestly don't actually know. I haven't pressed any of this stuff. At some point I might need to, just something to think about, but for now it works just fine, just having the default version. Now, this is a little more intuitive for me because I am a programmer. But if you never programmed before, I highly recommend that you kind of like read all the comments that you can, and just kind of follow along, and any video, any resource you can find on this specific field, because a lot of it's going to be like, I want to do something, but I don't necessarily know what words to type or what keywords to type in order to make that thing happen. So until you get familiar with that, the syntax, it's going to be hard in general, even if you're a very logical person. You're just going to have to learn a lot of words. Anyway, so right now we don't need these vars, but it's a good example to show you how a variable is constructed. Here it tells you that it tells you what this function does. Just call it gets called the first time this node enters a scene. It's very useful for I think of like a spawn animation or a spawn effect. I would want to play it here, or maybe like I want to set its life back to 100 or something. Who knows? There's a lot of things you can do with a function like this, but just kind of think about, that's the type of thing I think about whenever I see a function and what it can do. Here's another one, and this is going to be where the bulk of our work comes in. So we want to take out these pound signs, hashtag pound signs, and just put some spaces in there, and this is where you're going to want to do the bulk of your work, because this gets called every frame. It's on a loop, so it'll always get called, and we can do checks, we can do movement based on time, we do a lot of different things right here. So at this point, I have, like when I was making the other video, I had no idea what the functions are called. I had no way to know, because I never used this engine. So I simply just looked up how to make a character move, and I ended up finding this move and slide function. And immediately the first thing I saw was vector2, so I knew that I'm going to need to pass a vector2. So here, where it says equals vector2, that means that it's a default argument, the default parameter. So you don't need to put anything in there. It's going to put in the 0, 0 automatically. And so technically this has a bunch of arguments in it, but you only need to put in one, and that's that vector. So immediately what we can do is just make a vector. Movement, we'll call it movement, equals vector 2. And you saw the way it was written in the example here. See how it has a 0, 0 here? We'll do the exact same thing, and that's how we just initialize a vector. We want to move in and put movement into this function and close the parentheses so it doesn't complain anymore. Now that we have that, we're now successfully moving the character by 0, 0, which means it's currently not moving. So effectively we've done nothing. Now, because of that, because we know that this that's what it takes, we can play around with these numbers to see what it does. That's basically what I ended up doing when I started, and I just started throwing in numbers in there until I was like, okay, so if I put a positive number there, that's what happens. If I put a negative number there, oh, it just flew off because I was too fast. And I just played around with the numbers, and I really recommend that you do the same so you can get a feel for what it does, so what type of movement you get out of it. So, and the reason why it was moving up and down right there is because this is the y-axis. So if we change the x-axis, we'll get a movement on the x-axis. Really important to know. So now we have movement. We know how we know if to change those numbers, we can get movements. But the next thing we need to know is how do we know when we press the button? And to do that, basically the same thing. How to check for button presses or input or something. And I got input, which was kind of here already. So I got input recommended to me, and I just kind of read what it did a little bit and noticed that there was some functions that told me exactly when a button, an action was pressed. So I went ahead and used that. If input is action pressed. Again, this is, and I don't want to use just pressed. I want to use pressed. I think just press is going to be that one time, like kind of like an event. And press is going to be checking, like if you're holding down or holding it down or something like that, which is going to be more useful for us. We're just closing out the parentheses and finishing out the statement. And here, what we want to do is add check for right. And it says UI right. That just means the arrow key, the right arrow key. I don't know if any other button works with it, but that's what I saw working with it. And we just want to change the movement. So we know that changing the x-axis is going to give us our left to right movement. And since we already tested out the numbers, we know that, oh wait, I want to set it to, we know that 200 was a speed that I enjoyed. You can put whatever you want, but 200 was the number that I put, and when you test it, you get right movement. And that's very good and all, and now can we do this for the left? And the answer is yes. And it's very simple. We already know how to do it for the right. We can do the exact same thing for the left with very minimal changes, like changes this to left and changing this to a negative number, because we know that from our testing of random number inputs here that negative numbers make them go left on the x-axis. So we got right, left, and now we successfully are moving our character.
So by now you have a character going left and right, and if they're doing more than that, awesome. And I hope now you're starting to think about how you can break down features into skills that you need to learn and want to learn in order to make those features happen. In the next video, we're going to have to figure out how to jump and all the components that are needed to make a jump happen. And we're going to see very quickly that it's more than just the character involved in this. But that's for the next video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please comment, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one.